Welcome to Vault 33, a podcast for Amazon Prime's Fallout. We are your hosts, Andrew Sarsini,
Dwayne D,
and Tosin Unafawakan.
We just watched the final episode of Fallout's first season, entitled The Beginning. We assume you have as well. Total spoilers ahead. Let's dive into the after talk. Remember to follow us on Twitter at Fallout Vault 33. Add us on iTunes, Spotify, other streaming services. Like us, please leave us a review. That's how we get noticed. We also have a brand new YouTube. All of our, first of all, and I'll go over this again at the very end, but the company that we produce all of these podcasts under is called Deep Geek Media, and Deep Geek Media has a YouTube account where we've posted all of the past episodes of Vault 33 and all of the past episodes of Quarantine Zone, and no, that's it, just those two.
Quarantine Zone is our Last of Us podcast.
Yes. But the best thing you can do is spread the word and tell your friends. This episode, The Beginning, is written by Grisimran Sandhu and directed by Wayne Yip, who has like this phenomenal CV of past shows like Utopia, Misfits, Doctor Who, and Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power. So this guy's been around too.
Dwayne, I like his name.
Yeah, Wayne Yip. Wayne Che Yip. Dwayne, why don't you hit us up with the recap of this episode?
All right, here we go. We begin with a Brotherhood vertibird aircraft propelling itself over the wasteland. Maximus is seated in it, remembering his time with Lucy, as it lands in Philly, where the Brotherhood have taken over and elder brother Quintus is kind of holding court. Maximus gives Quintus the severed head from the radio station, and when Quintus discovers that what he's looking for is not inside the head, he decides to execute Maximus for Dane's leg, for the death of Knight Titus, and for lying about the head. Dane pleads with Quintus, saying that they cut their own ankle, while Maximus tells the Brotherhood that he knows where to find the real head. Quintus stays the execution and later approaches Maximus. He tells Maximus of how the Brotherhood has lost its way and once ruled the wasteland. Quintus makes a pact with Maximus that if he can lead the Brotherhood of Steel to Wilzig's severed head, then they could found a new Brotherhood with an increased role for Maximus as the organization's proverbial sword. Maximus tells Dane of his plan to join Lucy after they save her, and he invites Dane to join them. We see Cooper the Ghoul trek across the wasteland sands, following CX-404 as the dog chases after Wilzig's head. And in the past, we learned that Cooper Howard ended up using the listening device that Moldaver gave him to eavesdrop on his wife Barb during a meeting wherein the representatives of multiple giant corporations determined the fate of survivors of any nuclear apocalypse. We see the representatives of Robco, Westech, Big MT, and Repcon. We also learned that Barb, Cooper Howard's wife, suggested that Vault-Tec and other giant corporations of the era create various communities across the scores of vaults dotting the United States, and then, once set up, drop the bombs themselves. Lucy arrives at the Griffith Observatory, where Moldaver is hiding out. Moldaver has turned the place into the new California Republic's headquarters. She finds a multicultural community where they're raising children, and ghouls and people live together. She's escorted to Moldaver, where she sees her father in a cage, and Moldaver sharing a meal at a table with a ghoul that's gone feral. Lucy gives Moldaver Wilzig's head, and Moldaver agrees to release her father, but only after telling her who her father really is. Turns out both Betty Pearson and Hank McLean were among many low-level Vault-Tec employees who agreed to join the Vault-Tec Vault 31, 32, 33 project. It was one of what Barb would call a good vault, a management vault. Under the management of Bud Askins, whose brain was removed and placed into a machine allowing him to remain immortal, many Vault-Tec employees from Bud Askins' assistant training plan were cryogenically preserved in Vault 31. They were then woken up periodically and added to the populations of Vault 32 and 33, who assumed that Vault 31 was just like theirs. Their task was to live out their days contributing to the society of Vault 32 and 33 as their overseers, guiding the two micro-societies with the positivity and ability to make lemonade from lemons that they had learned in Bud Askins' training program, until Reclamation Day, when they hoped to use the people of the two vaults to repopulate the surface. Moldaver lets Lucy know that her mother realized that there were people on the surface. She left Vault 33 and took her children there. Hank found them and she refused to go back to 1233. So he took Lucy and Norm and then destroyed the place, Shady Sands. We also learned that the Pharaoh Ghoul at Moldaver's table is none other than what remains of Lucy's mother. It's also what Norm learns when he's in Vault 31. He understands that a significant part of the plan was to make sure the surface of the Earth was wiped clean so that Bud Askin's trainees could be populated with little to no opposition. In order to keep the secret, he's forced to submit himself into his father's cryopod or stasis pod and goes to sleep. Lucy convinces her caged father to give Moldaver the code she needs to activate the cold fusion technology that she retrieved from Wilczek's head. As the machine wears up, the Brotherhood attacks and Maximus and Dane engage Moldaver's forces. Despite fierce resistance, losing aircraft and armored knights, the Brotherhood seems to gain the upper hand of the New California Republic forces, until Cooper the Ghoul makes an appearance. Cooper the Ghoul uses his knowledge of a flaw in the old T-45 powered armor suits to kill many knights. Maximus finds his way to Lucy and Hank. He sets Hank free just before Lucy tells him that Hank is the person who destroyed Shady Sands. Before he can get to Hank, Lucy's father hops into a powered armored suit that's fallen. He hurts Maximus, and before Lucy can shoot him, Cooper the Ghoul shows up and wounds Hank. Cooper the Ghoul gives Hank a chance to tell him where his family is, but Hank uses his powered armor to flee, and he flies away. Cooper the Ghoul tells Lucy that when the Brotherhood of Steel takes the observatory, they're going to put everyone in it to the sword. She can die there, or she can go with him to discover the truth about their father, about Vault-Tec, and the people behind this entire mess. Lucy kills the Pharaoh Ghoul that was once her mother, and reluctantly leaves Maximus with a kiss. Then she joins Cooper the Ghoul. Maximus awakes in the observatory to find himself alone without Lucy, but near the cold fusion machine. He sees Moldaver come into the chamber and activate the cold fusion machinery. And the lights turn on across the remains of the city below the observatory. Moldaver, who's mortally wounded, asks Maximus, "What do you suppose your Brotherhood will do with infinite power? Maybe you can stop them. Maybe you can't. Maybe all you can do is try." Then she dies as Brotherhood reinforcements take the room. Dane sees Maximus next to the dead Moldaver, and despite his protests, proclaims that he killed their leader and secured cold fusion for the Brotherhood. He's battlefield promoted to the rank of Knight Maximus. We see Cooper the Ghoul, Lucy, and CX-404 head out in search of Hank, and then we see Hank himself. He lands his powered armor after having fled from the scene, and he looks out to the city of New Vegas. And that is the end. So they wrapped up a lot of stuff. Yeah.
No kidding. Yeah, it was pretty dense. But
it was so dense, dude.
Yeah.
Putting that summary together also with the editing, it was so dense. It was dense.
You're better you than me. So in general, Dwayne, what did you think about this episode?
Like you said, dense, but it had to put together a lot of wrap up a lot of loose ends. And I think it did a pretty good job at that. I left me with some questions, which is good. I thought there was only one kind of glaring thing that annoyed me, and we can talk about it a little later. But for the most part, I feel like it told a solid story. There was a beginning, middle, and end to the season, and there's potential for more storytelling that's going to expand the universe and get us closer to some of those big answers to those big picture questions. And overall, I felt pretty satisfied. With the exception of, and I'm not annoyed at this, but I felt less satisfied about what happened to Norm because I love that character and I wanted to see him kind of do some more rabble rousing. But I enjoyed it. What did you think, Tosin?
Yeah, I thought this episode was really well done. The closure you guys spoke of was good, but I also think that the editing in parts was flowed really well, and there was a lot of things that we'll talk about in salient points and big picture that I think were really solidified and added a bit more depth to that I really loved, and a lot of subtle touches there too in this episode. So excited to discuss with you guys. What about yourself, Andy? What did you think?
I loved it. I thought it was a great wrap up. I several times throughout the episode while I was watching it, I was going, yes, because I felt entirely validated by my predictions going on. But I feel like I don't want to take the credit for that. I think really what that is a showing off how good the writers on this show are about, laying little hints about the big
foundation
picture.
and consistency.
Yeah.
Unlike Westworld, they're not kind of just going to throw something out there and say, "Oh, you couldn't have seen it, but isn't this a great twist?" They're like straight up being like,
Right.
"We laid out the foundation, so if you were paying attention, you could put this together."
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
a very satisfying thing to experience as a viewer.
Yes. Satisfying, because I'm like, because it really rewards
Close watching.
Yes, rewards active viewing. So you're watching it and you're like, okay, I'm picking up these little hints, these tiny little things. They're all littered throughout the entire season, and here they are. All of the threads are getting tied up. So yeah, I thought it was a really exciting episode.
Before you go on, let me ask
Yeah.
you this. This is for both of you. The fact that you were able to watch and see those hints and then kind of feel validated toward the end.
Yeah.
Did it help that the show was released kind of all at once, kind of in this 8-hour mega movie kind of thing? Or do you think it wouldn't have mattered?
Well, for me, it didn't matter because, well, I'm sure most of our listeners have been binging this all as one big mega movie. For me, I've been pretty much consuming it week to week as we've been recording this podcast. So, it's kind of I've been feeling the clues and stuff laid out systematically.
Yeah, I'd agree. Same for me, because of our week to week nature, and also because the level of depth that we go into as a podcast. I don't know if our viewers know this, but we all watch each episode multiple times and take notes and really try and examine it and see what things surface during our viewings. So I don't think that had an impact on it, but I think it was a nice feeling to see validation, but I also really didn't need it for myself because I just love the direction the story went, the storytelling, and the acting, because there was a lot of subtle acting that went on that really added to the overall work.
Yeah, there are definitely some the guest performances or the non-main character performances were much more impactful, if that's a word, than I would expect, and they really took the show to another level. But yeah, let's think about these salient points.
All right, so Tosin, why don't you kick us off with some salient points that you gleaned from this episode?
Sure, I can do that. We're changing it up the last episode, huh? Not really a salient point, but I found it a little hilarious when the misspelling of what we assume is Philly, with a F-I-L-L, and so that kind of cracked me up. Just I think within the episodes,
but
in general,
it's not Philadelphia though.
No,
it's still next to Los Angeles.
It's still near Los Angeles.
Which is what I thought in the beginning when I first started watching. I was like, wow, they made it from Philadelphia all the way to Los Angeles? Yeah. And I was like, no, Dwayne.
It's just whatever they choose, whatever folks choose to name places. And you see that in the other episodes as well, too, and in how they choose to call it, as well as, for a sort of futuristic technology associated world, there's a lot of sort of backwardsness that has come from
anachronisms, right?
Yeah, sort of from civilization starting over or restarting in points.
Yeah, even the vaults have streets like Sycamore Street or whatever. It's like, okay.
Oh, right. Aping classic Americana streets.
Yep, totally. All right, what else you see?
Another interesting point for me was the elder cleric.
Quintus.
Quintus, when he talks to Maximus behind closed doors, he says, "We will take power, and with it we will start a new brotherhood with me as its head and the likes of you as its sword." So I found that line salient for a couple reasons. One, we've seen and heard the Ghoul and Cooper have kind of note that this is a story as old as time, of people forcing their beliefs and desires on others. Or having these strong desires in which they think that they can change and mold and improve the world. But really, all of it is done through force and violence. And this is just the classic story, and it continues here. But the second part of this line is where Quintus talks specifically about himself, but then he says the likes of you, right? So even in this line, Maximus is still like a lower class citizen. He is, even though he's here to try and architect and lead into this new world. It's not you, it's the likes of you. So it could be other people. And we
like if Maximus, if you fall during battle, then, you know, but I think what he was trying to say is that people like you. So, you know, Maximus went out there, and I think just before or just during his like kind of like other speech in front of everybody, he talks about how power is taken and not given. And so Maximus, in his view, he took from Titus, right? He took the role that Dane was supposed to have, and when he was out there, you know, even if he didn't have the head, he's like, I know where it is, and him knowing where it is a power move, right? He's like, I know where the head is, we can go get it, but I didn't have it on me right now, and you know, like that kind of goes to show that like he's bargaining, right? He's like, I have a chip in my pocket. Yeah. So I think on some level he's like, you're a leader. You were just a random a squire, and before that an aspirant, but you're actually much more leadership material than I thought. And because of that, we need people like you, Maximus. And it kind of felt like it was like, I think you're right, Tosin. There was something cheap about it, right? Like you don't really matter, but I'm going to try to inspire you, and I'm going to try to entice you because I really want that head with its with whatever secret is inside of it. So I thought that was really interesting, but I also feel like Quintus is a true believer in himself, and that was creepy.
I mean, I think the other piece to it is we know that, you know, after that scene, Maximus no longer gets to wear the red suit that the folks who are in who have a higher status and are able to, you know, maneuver inside the mech suits. He goes back to sort of the squire attire. And so I think that's also another sign there that you're still this peon in this world, as much as he's trying to inspire him, but he's really just trying to use him as a tool, right? Yeah. All of these individuals for the Brotherhood are just tools to this guy's ultimate desires.
Two things I pulled out of that is that it's interesting where you've got the Brotherhood of Steel, and they run on order. Like, order is about every aspect of their organization. And so it was interesting to me that what Quintus is praising Maximus for is for initiative, which is initiative specifically contradicting orders. And he said,
it's almost very American, right? This idea that like, hey man, you got to play by the rules, but this guy's a big deal because he didn't play by the rules.
Yes,
you know,
and
it's the kind of American conundrum.
The other thing is, Tosin, to your point about him saying, we will take power, and with it we will start a new brotherhood with me as its head and the likes of you as its sword. I did pick up that, okay, so Quintus clearly sees himself as a ruling class, but he did not specifically say you as its sword. Like, it's like you are secondary. Like, it doesn't have to be you, Maximus. Someone like you for sure.
Right. But that's what, like, a lot of people in power are constantly turning regular sort of people into tools by saying, we need men like you. You know, how often have you heard that kind of stuff?
It felt like
Uncle Sam needs you almost. You know what I mean?
It felt like a very cagey, like, covering his ass.
Totally. But by the end, when Maximus's arm is raised by Dane because he's the one that took out Moldaver, now Quintus has created a person he can't get rid of.
Right.
Yeah. I love how Maximus keeps failing up, right? He still hasn't killed anyone, right?
Right.
He's always there to watch them die.
He killed the fiends.
Okay, he did kill the fiends.
And that's the most justified killing you could possibly have, is when people are about to pull on you and then eat you. So that was legit.
Right. And I can't recall, did they shoot first or did he?
They drew
he saw
first.
It coming, so they drew, and then he drew, and then one of them ended up getting him. But it was definitely like they drew first.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, he reaps the goods, and more power to you, Maximus.
Yeah, I mean his character was just so surprising. I don't think any of us expected his character to be the kind of standout that it was. I mean, I'm not going to say he overshadowed Lucy or anything like that, but I will say that it was always a delight to see how Maximus was going to get away with or get through something, right? Especially when he was sitting there eating his popcorn. Like he was a person of incredible embarrassment. All the time, right?
Yeah.
Like if Maximus was on screen, you had to prepare to pause it because you were about to cringe, right? Whether he was like chasing after that bear as it took out his like leader, whether he was he's like, oh no, he's got to fight these guys to get his suit back. How's he gonna pull that off? Like every time, like, oh no, he got stuck in the suit. He's totally gonna die in there. Oh, the cockroaches! Like every single time you saw him, he's on the edge of his like life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was I don't know. I thought it was pretty good.
Well, one thing, talking about Maximus not killing too many people, or at least major individuals in the storyline, Lucy, when she kills, it's out of compassion, right? So we see her kill her mom, who is not living the best life that an individual could have. Put it kindly. But we also, previously we saw her kill the lady in that store or hospital thing that was coming towards her.
Another feral ghoul, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
And
Martha,
yeah,
my name
so
is Martha.
I'm curious to see. We know that this show has been renewed for season 2. If that will continue for Lucy, or if Lucy will be a little bit more life taking, right?
Yeah.
In one of the close to last scenes where she says "okie dokie," it's less with that sort of cheery, happy-go-lucky conviction, and more with like, hey, determination.
Yeah.
I have a task at hand. I have a real serious goal. Yeah. She's changed a lot, right?
She might have popped one in her father's face if the ghoul hadn't shown up. It was unclear what was going to happen there. They did a good tense moment where we're like, is Lucy going to fall?
Let's talk about the Moldavers community for a moment. I thought it was interesting that in that community you see ghouls working side by side with smooth faces, with smoothies, which I don't remember seeing anywhere else outside of...
No, ghouls are taboo, which is why when Thaddeus became a ghoul, the first thing he did was like, oh man, the Brotherhood's going to kill me, right? And then... the other ghouls you see, like basically people are all afraid that the ghouls will turn feral on them and try to eat them. Right. So the idea that they could live side by side.
So like Moldavers fostering this example of community, like even after the apocalypse.
Yeah, she's just super. I mean the what's it called? The conventional wisdom of the world is like, don't do that, and she's like, I'm going to buck the conventional wisdom, which is exactly what she did. When she back in the day, right? We still don't know how she survived all that long, right? So that's a big mystery because
we don't know what kind of community Shady Sands was like.
Exactly, and she must have been in Shady Sands possibly to be like the fire mother or whatever that the Vault 4 guys were praying to. So you got to wonder, sort of, yes, she's aged 20, 25 years, but her story is still relatively untold. So I wonder if that's going to come up in the next one.
Yeah, and the interesting thing for me is kind of seeing this community from Lucy's eyes, which her initial instincts in the way it's acted is that it kind of mirrors the world that she came from, the cornfields, kids and people in general.
Yes.
But at least on the surface, and then you notice the ghouls and the other folks being able to live together. Perhaps some of this is also some of the memories of her that she had as a child. But I love that we continue to challenge her beliefs, right? Yeah. She's going on this quest, going on this mission, this person who stole her father, who brought all these sort of, wild raiders and hooligans and what she considers like baddies to her community, and enters this community, and it's not at all what the gates may show when she enters it. And so I think that is quite compelling.
Yeah, she entered it and it felt like The Walking Dead or something, like going to Hilltop. Like it felt like a very like used trope. And then you suddenly realize when she was a kid and she said she thought she really felt that the lights in the open air space of the vault were
the
really
sun
the
was
sun.
shining. Yeah.
And in fact, it really was the sun because she really was in cornfields that were upstate, like, in the outside world. But she, whether selective memory or she was too young, she didn't remember it, possibly until that moment. So that was pretty powerful for.
Yeah, I mean, I also love that it takes place at Griffith Observatory, which is here in LA. And one of the things
that's a magical setting for so many reasons.
Right. It has this view of LA as the city. And so you can kind of see the extent of Los Angeles from quite a vista up, like, kind of like a city up on a hill type of thing. But it's also a place where, it's got an observatorium, so you can look at space and see the worlds beyond. So it's kind of a guiding light, right? And guiding principle light. And then I love, like, immediately after, the scene cuts to the Vault-Tec building, right? Which is supposed to be a foundational, influential, and potentially even a guiding organization in how they see themselves or describe themselves in commercials using Cooper. But we find out that it's more nefarious than a place of hypothetical promise.
Yeah. Also with the Griffith Observatory, it's in the very first scenes from the first episode, the end.
Yeah.
You see kind of LA from the top of this hill where this family lives with their fancy birthday party for their child.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And then here at the end, and you see it being destroyed. And here at the end of the beginning, you see Moldaver at the Griffith Observatory looking down on the remains of LA and lighting it up, possibly building a new LA, right?
That's a nice bookend.
So yeah, it was pretty powerful to me, especially because during the course of the episode, you keep on hearing about this. The course of the series, you hear about this resource war, and the idea that everyone has access to energy, which, as we know, enough energy allows you to do all sorts of things, right? It can help with your crops. You can Haber-Bosch helps you do the whole fertilizer thing. It just helps with everything. Like, you think about energy in terms of the lights, but it works with transportation. It works with raising crops. It works with, and crops help raise livestock. It works with everything. So she was like, if we don't have to fight about this, maybe we don't have to fight, which is a good contrast to war never changes. Right. Kind of avoid the war. So I thought it was great to the Griffith Observatory looking down at LA versus the beginning where we see LA completely destroyed by bombs that we now know were possibly dropped by Vault-Tec.
Of course, yes. Yeah.
Speaking of that line where she says war never changes.
Yeah.
The first thing that came to me is that, what we've also learned from Cooper is, and neither do humans. Humans don't change either, right? There's still that innate drive to seek power, to think that your ideas are the best and will be the savior of the place, and then wield others as your sword to essentially just take over and rebuild the world in whatever image that you have. So it's
which is so interesting because
humans, right?
Cooper doesn't do that, right? He doesn't actually try to make people. He doesn't want to wage a war. He's out there. He's on his own. He's like the rugged individual. He's for himself. But everyone around him does, like the factions, like the Vaulters or the Brotherhood, or maybe I forgot the name of the place that Wilzig came from, the Conclave, or whatever it is. They all have their kind of like focus on how they can save the world, which is what Maximus says. He's like, everyone wants to save the world, they just don't agree on how, right?
Right.
So that was pretty wild. What do you got up next?
So yeah, let me talk for a bit about Bud Askins and the the conference over at Vault-Tec in the past. So, like,
I have so many questions about that conference.
So it feels like Bud Askins ended up being like, he in the episode where we saw Cooper shooting the promo video for Vault-Tec, Bud Askins feels like this sort of slimy salesman, and he's spitting out these aphorisms about time and everything, and they just feel so sort of superficial at the time. But it turns out like this guy is really leaned into.
Oh man, they all have, right? Like,
yeah.
All of these people who decided to cryo freeze themselves so they could live out the rest of their days pretending to be people also from a vault, but actually from the 1960s. That is so like,
yes.
What did Maximus say? It's a cult.
It's a cult. It's a cult. And Bud Askins, his quote in this episode was,
"Time is the apex predator. And in the event of an incident, time is the weapon with which we will defeat all of our enemies. That is how we will win the great game of capitalism, not by outfighting anyone, but by outliving them."
He's really like leaning into the eternal, like an ancient pharaoh. This is like my legacy will be eternal and will live on for generations. But not only is he speaking in sort of the spiritual sense, like a pharaoh, but he's actually logistically trying to make it happen with these buds, these cryopreserved humans. Which he chose to manage 32 and 33, saying,
"They're our breeding pool, the ultimate expression of HRR&D, genetically selected to breed with my buds to create a class of super managers, people with positivity, people who make lemonade, people who will inherit the earth after we've wiped the surface clean." That
is some like next level genocidal madman stuff right there.
Can we also talk about buds? Can we talk about buds? Okay, so first of all, this is a joke. Buds. I'm Bud. These are my buds, right? So buds is also a term for friendship, right? Like, hey, these are my friends.
Right.
And, Bud Askins, he never seemed like he was at the very top leadership of Vault-Tec.
No. He always felt like middle management.
Middle management, exactly. So the idea that he had all this power was surprising, but also Bud's buds, all of them are like junior management, if anything, right? Executive assistants.
Right.
Betty Pearson's getting coffee for Barb, and Hank is listed as executive assistant in terms of his title, which is kind of traditionally what people would have called a secretary kind of stuff. So these people in the management training program, they're green. They're ripe for a person like Bud in middle management to say, "Hey man, look how far I've gotten," even though he hasn't gotten super far, and say, "Hey, follow me." And so they did that. The second thing is, because they're all in cryopods or stasis pods or whatever we want to call them, they're like buds. Like they haven't fully lived out their lives yet. Like we now see an elder Betty Pearson, but by the time when she went into her pod, she was basically still a kid, right? Just like Hank was basically still a kid. And so now where they're no longer, they were these buds, and Bud kind of he planted these buds into 31, 32, and 33 in order for them to grow into these overseers that guided the civilization. But yeah, that's like, people like Stephanie and Betty and Hank.
I kind of wonder like how many times they've been thought out over 220 years. Like, is this the first iteration?
So like for like continuing education training stuff? I think they just live out their lives. I think Betty gets woken up and you're like, okay, you're going to go to 33. And she's like, okay, I guess I'm going to go to 33. And she was there for a while before Hank was there, right? Which is why Hank is so much younger than Betty, even though they were the same age back in the day. That's the thing you're getting. So people are living out their entire lives in the Vault-Tec world, preparing for Reclamation Day. It's like people who are getting ready for, Jesus to come back or something. It's very religious in a way. Like you have to be very committed to leave your family to go live in this vault and be with people who, believe in the same exact thing you do vis-a-vis management. And we all know that like management, there's a lot of bullshit in management. And that's what's so strange that's what's so like dark humor about this. The idea that this middle manager, Bud Askins, who was really bad at the T45, is now controlling the fate of the world through his middle management bullshit. You know, that is a wild concept, and it's scary. You know.
Well, he is the brain on wheels, right?
Yeah. The Amazon Prime X-ray called him brain on a Roomba.
Right. Hilarious.
She's just like, okay. And then the fact is, like, I wish I could go to sleep. So, and we all know that people who don't sleep like suffer like incredible mental illness.
Right.
So, you know, Bud is he's a madman, and he literally tries to kill Norm. He's like, hey, let me just stick you with this.
Right.
You know? And he's like, okay, I can't stick you with it. You're too, I guess, fast for me, and also I can't really see, so I keep on bumping into stuff. So I'm going to make you starve, or you can get in your father's cryopod, because I'm committed to my situation here.
Right.
It was all so bizarre. And that's why I'm so sad for Norm.
You want to talk about the meeting with the other heads of the companies, the secret Vault-Tec meeting?
Yeah. So visually, I don't know if you guys ever saw Godfather Part 2.
Sure.
But that and a whole bunch of other movies that take place in the golden age of golden age of mobsters shows the commission. Right. This group of bosses, and they sit around at the table and they divvy the world up for their crime, you know, their organized crime ideals. And it felt like that, plus some like, you know, Austin Powers bad guy summit.
Right. Well, the room that they're in specifically for me recalled shades of
Dr. Strangelove.
Dr. Strangelove, exactly. Yes. The war room in Dr. Strangelove.
Yeah, so all these things are playing in. All these things are playing in to this idea that these people are nefarious, and they're nefarious not just because of, you know, their companies or whatever. You don't have to know anything about their companies, but the setting is one that any person who's watched TV shows and movies that came out in the last like 50, 60, 70 years has seen that when people sit in a room like this, they're up to no good.
Right.
And that was to me, like, you know, Wayne Yip, the brilliant choices, right?
Yeah. Yes, I think there's a lot of interesting, like, nefarious stuff going on in here. Obviously, I think it's interesting at a certain point, Barb is, when she and Bud are kind of heading this meeting, at a certain point, she gets a message on her Pip-Boy, and she looks up, and there's a whole gallery of these shadowy figures who are watching over Barb.
It's a silhouette, the silhouettes.
These are the actual strings, people
it's
pulling
Hydra.
the strings. Yes. So I thought that was interesting. Some points about that meeting. There's over 100 vaults across America. That was interesting. And she calls on other execs in the Vault-Tec board to use the vaults for their own scientific and social experiments on the vault dwellers without their knowledge. She says nobody has to know. Whatever you do, no one has to know, which is pretty insidious. And I think those ideas that they name checked in the conference relate to ideas from the actual game franchise. I don't want to.
And then, like, obviously you have Vault 4, where they were like, okay, we'll do the science thing, and then you've got you know, what they did, and Bud has an idea, and so that was interesting. But interestingly enough, we didn't see Barb's body frozen up in Bud's little idea. So Barb is probably not there. You know,
I mean, Barb may have risen up the org chart and is maybe in New Vegas, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
But you know, of course, the most insidious point in this whole scene was
the jaw dropper.
The jaw dropper, which is Cooper discovering that it's Barb herself that suggests that Vault-Tec be responsible for dropping the bomb, which, you know, when I saw this, it hit me like a ton of bricks also, because I was
my stomach sunk so far down.
I was like literally shouting at the screen, no, Barb, no.
Well, it's also, you know, Barb sat there and she said in the hot tub, when she was getting out of the hot tub, she was like, you know, Vault-Tec exists with or without me. Mm-hmm. As if to say, you know, I got you with the what's it called? I got you with the advertisements, and I'm doing my thing at Vault-Tec. But she didn't seem like she was some super higher up. Yes, she was, you know, getting paid some nice money right? But she was just a working girl, so to speak. In terms of, she had a 9 to 5. She had, KPIs and goals, and she
Sure.
had pressure from her leadership, and she wasn't the one making the decisions. But when she's sitting in that meeting, you're like,
Yeah.
it sure seems like you're making the decisions, Barb. Even though she was
Yes,
looking up at the shadowy figures, like that was a pretty big decision for someone who doesn't have much power to make,
Yes. I mean, it all boils down to maybe Cooper not knowing Barb as well as he thought that he did.
Alimony, man.
Yeah.
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 It tickles me a little bit that essentially their idea is what the game Fallout Shelter is.
Oh,
Yeah.
the management, the
Right.
management.
You do your old each person
Uh-huh.
on their iPhone has their own vault that they manage and
Uh-huh.
decide how it runs and that's essentially what happened. We are all part of Vaultec when we play Fallout Shelter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And
It's
Vaultec
it's a simulation.
and Vaultec wanting to create a true monopoly by eliminating the rest of the population as competition.
Exactly, which is like, we talked about how Vaultec had all these symbols of like toxic capitalism, so to speak.
Sure.
But the thing about capitalism is that it's about competition, right? Ideally, and it becomes toxic when you have monopolies. And Vaultec is sitting around with its other guys out there saying, hey, you all rose to this level because you beat the competition.
Yeah.
Now it's time for us to become monopolies, which is so interesting to me because on some level, there's this idea that Vaultec, it'd be weird if Vaultec had made all of the things, right? If everything was Vaultec.
Sure.
It wouldn't make sense. But the fact that you've got Westech and Robco all contributing their technologies to make the vaults a success and to have all these devices lying around, this as creepy and disturbing as this meeting was, it put that all together. It made sense for me. I also didn't want to know the relationship between Westech and Vaultec. On some level, it seemed like when Bud Askins moved over from Westech to Vaultec, they were part of the same thing. But now it seems like maybe they were different. He just kind of he didn't move over. He got fired from Westech and he found a job at Vaultec.
He failed upwards into Vaultec.
Exactly.
It feels to me like this whole thing is sort of a commentary on the true id of capitalist organizations. Like truly what they would love to do is just be the only provider out there,
the only game in town,
the only profit maker out there, and eliminate their competition. Literally, if they could eliminate their competition, they would.
Right. So, and capitalism is about the aggregation of capital. If you read about its kind of fundamentals, at the end of the day, all the capital is consolidated into one place, right? And that is, that's why we have the FTC, so that doesn't happen,
right?
Trust busting and things like that. So it's worth noting. But yeah, it underscores how bad things can go, and that's what's so great about the dystopian nature of science fiction. At first, you're just like, it's just some video game. There's going to be shooting, whatever. But you actually get to the heart of actual science fiction, which is talking about our society in this show, and that was a surprising twist.
Let's move over briefly to the Brotherhood for a second. So we find out in this episode that Dane was scared of going into the wilds, which is why they self-sabotaged. I thought it was interesting that Dane understands, you get the sense when Dane talks to Maximus, and Maximus is talking about the ideal of living in the vault. That Dane, we see that Maximus still has a sense of naivete about him, and Dane understands, even if Maximus is too naive to understand it, that there's nowhere safe from war and there's no leaving the Brotherhood. It's just too powerful of an organization.
Exactly, and we also know that Maximus was happy to be in the Brotherhood because his home was destroyed, he was orphaned, and they offered 3 square meals a day. But he's not necessarily a believer the way Dane is. Dane had memorized all the sort of reasons why you have to go get the ancient technology and all that stuff. And when Maximus was in class, he just get it wrong. But Dane they really understood everything. So Dane is a bit more of a believer, and Dane is also, they weren't one of those people trying to beat Maximus up for the sake of what's it called, like hazing or whatever, like Thaddeus was.
Right.
So they are totally a believer in what's going on, and they were afraid to go out there, so they hurt themselves. Meanwhile, Maximus was like, I just want, more. I had nothing. I want more. And sitting in a vault eating my popcorn felt like more. It doesn't take much to satisfy me. They had a television set and some popcorn. They had the gift bag, the gift basket, and I just wanted more. So Dane, come join me for the more. And Dane's like, dude, that's not legit. So even though Dane didn't want to be out there, Dane was like, it's not, being in there isn't going to be safe either.
Maximus says, hey, the vault is peaceful, safe, and no one goes to war. And so he has this idealized concept of the vault as seeded by Lucy, and also probably from his experience in Vault 4.
Yeah,
but we all know, as the audience, that's not the case, right? As we've learned as a big theme, war and people never change. So we all know that that illusion will most likely be broken, and maybe somehow who knows, maybe a little bit has been, since Lucy is not around. Lucy left him. So we'll see. We'll see what that holds there.
What's so crazy is he gets to Vault 4, he's like, it's a cult, and then he's happy to be part of the cult. He's like, Dane, let's go join the Vault 4 cult.
Right. Which is so funny that I see when I see Quintus praising Maximus for his values, when Maximus would just love to be sitting on a couch eating caviar and popcorn and watching waterfall videos on TV.
Bon, whatever, and caviar dreams.
Let's move over to the Griffith Observatory dome for the conclusion of the episode. I thought it was interesting that Hank, in his own mind, he rationalized killing his wife Rose because she took the kids, in his mind, into danger by kidnapping them and taking them to Shady Sands.
That's totally par for the course for who he is when we really know who he is. Because remember, in the scene, in the scene with Cooper.
Yeah,
we learned that his favorite scene is in the movie when Cooper shoots the guy in the face, right?
The scene that Cooper hates.
Right. And that scene is really about justice and punishment, but not compassion or potentially integrity, which is what Cooper voices. And you kind of see those same sort of themes in how he acts with, trying to get his kids back and then punishing the civilization that was out there, as well as just his beliefs just generally with, us good, them bad,
Yeah, so Vault-Tec can't achieve Reclamation Day if there are already people succeeding on the surface. If people are succeeding on the surface in Shady Sands or the New California Republic or whatever, then there's never been a need for people to be in vaults because they could have just been out there contributing. So the idea that those people are out there is a threat to the identity of vault overseers. So somehow, some way, Hank seems to have gotten himself a nuclear weapon or some other gigantic bomb.
Yeah, Vault-Tec in general maybe have.
Yeah, the vaults are supposed to be sustainable for centuries, according to the meeting. So he sat there and he like, okay, I got to blow this up. I'm sorry about my wife, but the fact is I believe in what we're doing here, and they can't be out there. She's undermining what we're doing in here by being out there. So, and also, when you saw those cornfields, when you saw some of the other things, it's clear that Lucy's mom brought that understanding or technology out, right? Those guys had gotten in because they had her Pip-Boy, so her Pip-Boy was out there. So it's Hank might have felt very betrayed. We'll find out maybe next season, but Hank felt very betrayed. And what's interesting is that he's not even like a born vaultie, but she is. So she's a born vaultie, and she's betraying the very thing. So she had to go, or else what happens if she tells other vaulties that there's a world out there? And she only figured out there's a world out there because there was water being used from whatever cistern or whatever their source of water, and that led her to go explore it and then to find out. And he's like, well, we can't have that. And he pawned it off as some big plague, right? Remember, Lucy, her mom died in the famine or the plague.
Right.
So he's diabolical.
He's diabolical. He's also like he's been indoctrinated. Like, it's interesting what he believes in, to be true, and you can tell that he's not just lying to Lucy, that he truly does believe in these things. He believes that he made the right choice of his peaceful world over their violent one, he tells her. But he doesn't understand that the Vault Dwellers, the people that he managed, don't have a choice. They didn't have the choice. He was making that choice for them. He didn't give them the choice by...
Him and Betty, yeah.
Yeah. So it's fascinating to see the deception, the level of self-deception that Hank is going through.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't give up, whatever family and friends he had to join Bud Askins so that all of it could be undermined when he got his shot. Like, let's remember, you get woken up and then you're supposed to be part of this thing, and your job is to contribute to this situation so that Reclamation Day can come. So you're going to live your entire life in this vault now, knowing the world has been destroyed up there theoretically, and that's your life. You're dedicating your life. You may not see you may not see the Reclamation Day. You may not, right? You're there to give your life for the goal of Reclamation Day. And so he's like, that's his religion, man. Like, so
totally,
he's like, hey,
totally.
You got to go.
He's bought into it. Totally.
Yeah.
It's interesting that that you gather from this episode that Hank may actually know the location of the Ghoul's family, of Barb, and when he says family,
it's 200 years later though, so it's like, is it going to be like Interstellar, where if the Ghoul shows up, it's going to be his descendants, or is it going to be that
I think
they were pulling a Moldaver and just happened to exist at the same time? They're still like, it's just very strange.
I'm willing to bet that Barb put herself into a cryo tube. I don't know about the kid though, because the kid, like, Hank rode off with the kid in the first episode, with his kid in the first episode.
Right, but he did say, "Where's my family?" And we know he doesn't mean his mom and dad. So I don't think my family is just Barb. I think it's probably Barb and Janie.
I think this is more backstory that we'll find out in season 2.
Exactly.
We get from this that the Ghoul is now going after whoever's in charge of Vault-Tec's plan.
Yeah, very Resident Evil.
Yes, which means that he didn't get satisfaction from from this exploration, from confronting Moldaver. So we know that whoever it is, there's someone bigger in charge, which is also what we see Overseer Hank. The last scene, we see him striding towards New Vegas, which was Las Vegas. And then Moldaver,
he's fine with New Vegas, but he's not fine with New California.
Right.
What a hypocrite.
Right. So those are, I think that's the last of my salient points. Did you have anything else?
I thought it was a little silly to make the Ghoul at Moldaver's table Lucy's mom. I get that on some level. Killing what remained of her mother and turning against her father is a sort of coming of age tale for Lucy. But if they hadn't answered the question of her mom, then we could see more mystery revealed about her mother in subsequent seasons, right? So there's some story, just like there's story with Moldaver, there's story with her mother. So imagine she didn't shoot her mother, that wasn't her mother.
Yeah.
And then she meets her mother second season, but Moldaver's dead. Her mother could talk about why she and Moldaver had gotten so close. And we could learn about, that would be a good vehicle to learn about how Moldaver survived the 200 years, why she's called, like, Mother of Fire or whatever.
Right.
Why she, how she got the name Moldaver, because that wasn't her name back in the 60s, or the 50s or whatever. So I thought it was a wasted opportunity, but it closed I understand why they did it. It closed a certain thread, tied off a certain thread.
I do appreciate the figurative rite of passage of Lucy leaving her past behind.
Yeah, and she's a grown up now. She was
Yeah.
obviously she's a grown up because she was trying to get married, but now she doesn't have anything holding her back, right? So there's that. I also thought this is a random side thing. If you're looking at the vertibirds, those big propeller aircraft that the Brotherhood of Steel uses, they run on fusion cores. I was wondering why they were propeller things in the far future, but. 60s technology, propellers, fine. 50s technology, rather. But 2, if it's a fuel-powered thing, it would have a stream of fuel coming out of the back.
Sure.
But getting fuel in that supply chain is pretty difficult.
Right.
But if you've got fusion cores that last for centuries, then, that's all you need to get it up and running. It may not be the fastest thing out there, but it's certainly faster than everybody else's stuff. So there it is. That was pretty interesting to me.
Okay, unanswered questions. Do we have any unanswered questions at the end of this episode? And I guess at the end of the season?
Yeah, so 2 things. One, we talked about this, who runs Vault-Tec. And then if, Barb and Bud Askins were these middle managing people, why were they running a strategic conversation? Like, it's high strategy, super high level stuff with leaders of other companies if they were just kind of like the middle managers, the VPs, whatever.
I have kind of a theory about that. Two theories about that.
Go ahead.
First of all, like in some organizations, in some other countries, like Asian countries, it's sometimes customary to let your direct underling take the reins, and you basically stand by and let them navigate the conversation unless they need extra help.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And also, it could be that maybe the shadowy figures who are really pulling the strings don't want to be revealed. They don't want anyone else to know who they are.
Yeah, I mean, there's plausible deniability too if you let Barb be the fall person for the destruction of the world, right?
Right.
So there's that. My second question is, why did Hank eventually give Moldaver the code to unlock cold fusion technology at Lucy's request? Like, he's such a believer. Somehow Lucy got to him emotionally in that moment, so he gave the code. It was just very...
Yeah, he thought he might lose her potentially, and he has no way out of the cage.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, he lost her, but yeah. It was a strange thing for me. It threw me out of my suspension.
I mean,
disbelief.
I'll buy the emotional, like, thinking he might lose her, because in episode 1 he says to her, "You are my world." So the potential of losing the one thing your world revolves around, I think, was enough.
I love the fact that when she goes to save him,
Yeah.
there's a reason why Moldaver took him. Like,
Yes.
it's not just that he's, she doesn't like him and she wants to torture him. She's like, I'm trying to get this code out of him.
Yes.
That was smart to me.
So I've got some questions here. The Enclave had cold fusion before Dr. Wilzig injected it into his neck and ran off with it. So how did they get it, and what was going to be their plan for it? Why didn't they use cold fusion?
It's interesting because I think on some level the Enclave's technology seems pretty Vault-Tec-y,
Yeah.
So they had things fall apart after 200 years. They had a piece of it, but they didn't have the means to deliver it, which is probably why he was headed to Moldaver. His correspondence with Moldaver was like, she's like, I got the computer hookup to make the most of the fusion stuff. He's like, well, I got the fusion stuff. Let me see if I can get it over to you. How am I going to hide it? And then you have to wonder, did he steal CX-404 because he just likes dogs, or did he steal CX-404 because it was part of his grander design, possibly help when he got out into the wasteland, or possibly a way to track him if he died? I don't know. It's just...
Yeah, there might be more to that, to be honest.
Yep.
But I was also like, well, there are other ways of sneaking this thing out without injecting it in yourself. And
Yes.
if you get caught by someone who doesn't have the right tools, they just have to cut off your head. It's like,
He did
There
bring
was a
that.
flaw to that plan.
He did bring that
Yeah.
chainsaw with him, though, so he
He did
knew.
bring the surgical saw. Yeah.
And
So
speaking
he
of,
was a believer too, right?
yes. Speaking of CX404, I don't remember seeing what happened to CX404 at the end. What happened?
Oh,
to...
that
He
she's
walks
with
away.
yeah, she's with the ghoul. Yeah. So the
okay.
the ghoul, CX404, and Lucy are all together.
I missed that. I missed Dogmeat joining them,
Which is interesting because, he had the dog before. He did a movie with the dog, so he's a dog guy.
yeah,
And then he's got Lucy now,
yeah,
and Lucy is a woman who just lost her father,
yes,
and he's a guy looking for his daughter.
Yes.
So
It's kind of like a
you know.
classic Western saga.
lone wolf and cub on some level.
Right. What happened to Norm? We don't actually see what he does. The brain on a Roomba tells him, you can either starve here or eat the occasional bug, or you can get in one of those cryopods. But we never actually see what happens. So, will he put himself into cryo storage in 31? I guess is another question I have.
I believe he probably does because he doesn't want to die. And then also, the one thing that the brain on a Roomba has going for him is he does control the doors, right? He
It's
opened
true.
the door to let him in, and he
true.
closed the door. So,
I feel
Yeah.
like Norm is smart enough to get himself out of this situation.
yeah, that is true, and he's going to do it in an unexpected way. I mean, Norm is definitely one of my favorite characters. Norm and Maximus, Aaron Moten,
Yeah.
their expressions just very surprising. Yeah, it was great. Also, it's weird how the woman cast for Lucy actually looks like Kyle MacLachlan a little bit.
Oh, yeah, I suppose. Yeah. I'll buy it if you're selling it. Moldaver powers on the ruined city. What's the city going to do with the new resources? Is one of my questions.
If you build it, they will come. She's going to rebuild society, but she's dead. So, yeah.
And the last question I have is: are we going to see New Vegas and Vault Tech Management in season 2?
Oh, I mean, they didn't tease that for no reason. I mean, Hank's out there. Vegas is only 4.5 hours away driving
But how
to
many
LA?
hours away walking in a power armor suit?
I mean, he flew.
That's
So,
true.
He might have gotten there in 2 hours, But also, it's just like he got so he gets over there. How long is it going to take? It's hard to track a flying thing, so there's that.
Mhm.
How Lucy and the others going to track him, but then how long is it going to take to get to Vegas on foot? If it's 4.5 hours driving, that's a long time on foot, especially with all the obstacles, side quest stuff in the way.
Tosin, any unanswered questions from you?
I had one question, and it's just, in your opinion, do you think Moldava was keeping Lucy's mom alive because she was her friend and like companionship, or do you think it was just simply as a tool a pawn in her plan, similar to Maximus being a sword for the guys?
I think they were close because
Well, they were close, but if you're close to a friend in that nature, or like mom, do you want to keep that person alive in that state? That's really the question.
That's true. Although I feel like when she was dying, she's like, "We finally did it, right?" So I don't know. Maybe she's like the governor, and she thought she could find a way to reverse her. But there was definitely some sort of love there, friendship, love. Maybe they turned into partners. I don't know. It was a weird thing to keep her mom alive in that state, and I think that's, to me, the only problem I've had with the show so far.
All right, let's talk about some big picture aspects. These are our examination of the broader themes of this episode as it relates to the season and series as a whole.
Fallout
Dwayne,
has been renewed, right?
it has been renewed. Yep, we're getting a season 2. Dwayne, you want to kick us off with a big picture point?
Yeah, first and foremost, why did Hank destroy Shady Sands, the new California Republic? I mean, I touched on this. He's in a cult, whatever, but and he's like, we got to destroy it. But Vault 4 is like accepting new people. What's keeping Hank from figuring out a way to use his management skills to manage this gigantic place out there. I mean, he's got resources from the vault. He could totally be like, hey guys, Vault 31 coming to lead.
I wonder if it was maybe like just pure sort of jealous rage, like a what do you call it, a passion crime.
Yeah, just so deliberate. You have to drag a nuke out there.
I want to talk a little bit about the idea that war never changes. I think it's interesting that which we hear a lot. It's a aphorism that's from the game franchise, but we hear it a lot in this episode. And Barb Cooper says it, that I think her position is that if war is going to be a constant anyway, it's inevitably going to happen, that Vault Tech may as well leverage war to their best advantage. They're going to want to come on top of the situation if it's going to happen anyway, and part of that is by instigating it.
She's like, look, if it's going to happen anyway, it might as well happen in a way that we can control. Right?
Yeah.
Kind of like dinner with your children.
The
whole thing is very patriarchal, right? This idea that
for sure,
it's going to happen anyway, we're going to control it. And then again, when it comes to the vault, we're going to create these societies, and the people in them will have no way of knowing and no informed consent. It's about super control. So yeah, that was I
mean, Vault-Tec comes across as that kind of company anyway. Very patriarchal.
Yeah.
Very family, quote unquote, family values. Hank says,
if the problem with the world is factions, endlessly fighting, endlessly at war, then what is the solution but to get rid of the factions? To make the world us.
Now, this is an obvious point, but like that is just...
It's like supremacist thinking.
It's just another faction controlling the narrative.
Yeah.
Right?
He's like, everyone's a problem except for us. Therefore, we have to get rid of everyone.
Yes.
This is like supremacist thinking. This is the kind of thinking that people do when they're ethnic cleansing, right?
Exactly. Which goes back to what Maximus said to Lucy at Shady Sands, the ruins of Shady Sands, where he says, everyone wants to save the world. They just disagree on how. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think, this is another point in terms of following one's beliefs, right? Hank says, I did what was necessary to save our people. And that, that woman is no different than me. Moldova also is trying to do what she believes is necessary. And
that's what Boromir says in the Fellowship of the Ring.
Right.
I only want the power to save my people. As
right.
He tries to steal the ring.
Right.
So tale is old as time, and none of these people are hobbits. So,
although Lucy is kind of incorruptibly innocent in a way, as the series has proven. So the idea that the fate of the world hangs in the balance of like how she makes choices when she decides to kill or not kill her father, sort of feels like Lord of the Ringsy, like Hobbity.
Yeah, I mean, she is changing. She did get her finger bitten off.
That's true.
And then sewn back on again. A new finger sewn back on again.
Cut off with a knife deliberately. Yeah, she bit off somebody else's finger.
Yeah, and there was no. She hasn't fallen into a pit or pushed someone in just yet, but we'll see. I think also Hank also says, I want to make a choice between their violent world and our peaceful one, as they're doing this sort of montage of the violence happening outside. And I think it is kind of ironic because, his favorite scene in that movie is a violent one that we talked about earlier.
Feo fuerte y formal.
Yep. He's also caused violence to save his peaceful world and, make the world us, only ours. Vault Dwellers are also a faction, as you guys covered. So
right.
It's very hypocritical, but it is.
Yes. Hank's values seem to be not rooted in reality. Like we see that from the past scenes that he is a fanboy. So he has this idealized Hollywood-esque version of value system.
Yeah, and remember, power is taken, not given. He was like, "Well, I'm gonna take the power from these Shady Sands people by exploding them."
All right, let's talk about some of the technical aspects, some of the behind the scenes elements we enjoyed in this episode: music, acting, visual effects. First of all, I like the clever little touch in the production of having Bud Askins in the past driving around in this teensy little mobile vehicle, which kind of foreshadows his fate as a brain on a Roomba. Like you're destined to be this big guy in a tiny car. No
Phenomenal cosmic power, itty bitty living space.
Right.
Genie from Aladdin.
I have to say, like, if I had any like one sort of criticism about this episode, the whole the whole last third of the episode plays out in this set of the observatory dome where Moldaver is and where
they paid for that set, Andy. We were like, we're gonna use it.
Yes, but it felt very much like a stage set. I didn't get the sense
that video was staged. Yeah,
I didn't get the sense that that they were outdoors at all. Like, it felt to me as fake as the sort of the holographic background in the vaults. So it did pull me out just a little bit. But
I
like
think
I said,
the vaults felt pretty real to me, to be honest. It felt like they were in some old industrial, I don't know.
No, but I'm talking about like the projected.
Oh, the projected
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Gotcha.
So-
I mean, it was definitely like a set piece.
Yeah.
You know, they put the corn down. They had the people at their tables. They had the children running through.
No, I'm talking about the dome set.
Then they went into the dome, and then so like it feels like it's a bigger thing. Then they get into the dome, and then it felt like they were in like Hollywood studio.
Totally.
100%. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. But that's part of the thing. There's a kind of studio-ness to Fallout because we start with Cooper Howard as the studio actor in the studio lot. So I kind of feel like they weren't super shying away from that. But yeah, I see what you're saying.
Another thing is the big reveal of Henry being Hank McClane. I found that very similar to, there's a very similar reveal at the end of Westworld season 1, which I'm not going to spoil because it's also a pivotal point, but it just gave me the sense that I could feel the DNA of Kilter Films from Westworld to Fallout. Like you could feel the fingerprints of Nolan and Joy on this for that reveal.
What if Hank was actually Henry?
Right. And lastly, for me, the ghoul that we see at Moldaver's table, which turns out to be Lucy's mom, I think that's the most decayed I've seen a ghoul on this show so far.
Yeah, she was wildly feral. I mean, if Shady Sands was blown up, 15 years before, then you can kind of see how, the most feral ghouls just either get shot or get destroyed somehow. So, but yeah, and she was also like irradiated, a nuclear explosion, so there's that.
Right.
On some level, she might have been Hank. Look what you did. That could have been her.
Yes, which might have been like a motivation for her keep, as well as just not wanting to get rid of her friend. Maybe the idea of having her there to sort of rub it in his face.
This is the woman you loved. Look what you did to the woman you loved.
All right, let's talk about some ephemera, which are links and extra textual connections that help enhance your enjoyment of this episode. Now, on May 9th of this year, Tosin and I attended a event at the Saban Media Center here in North Hollywood, California, and it was a event that Amazon Prime threw for Fallout for Emmy consideration, for your consideration event. So at that event, they screened the pilot episode, the first episode, and then they had a 30-minute panel discussion. And on that panel was Jonathan Nolan, who's the executive producer, the two showrunners, and also the actors who played Lucy, Maximus, Hank, and the ghoul / Cooper. So
So that was the main cast. It was very heavy.
Yeah. And then afterwards there was a reception.
Tea and crumpets.
Tea and crumpets. Well, the actors were out there, and they talked to people. But I wanted to, Tosin, what should you tell us a little bit about your impressions of this event?
I thought it was a really well-run event. It was always great to hear the insights and the process of the episode and even the show. And I also, the cast was incredibly friendly and generous with their time and willing to talk about the show as well as engage in a deep level. So it was really cool. I'm glad that you were able to record the panel, it seems.
Yes, so I recorded the panel, and we do have it on our Deep Geek Media YouTube account, and we'll have the link in our show notes, so you can check it out there as well.
Were you guys able to, when you spoke to any of the cast or the others that were there, any information or any questions get answered for you?
Nothing show related, but I will say that Aaron Moten, who plays Maximus, he came across as very down to earth. I had a nice little conversation with him, and he was very friendly and approachable. And I feel like I got the sense, like, the showbiz attitude had not quite hit him yet. So knock wood, hopefully it doesn't.
Well, I mean, I think
even his character is like is one that, he just took down the big bad, and he's like, I don't know, guys. So it's great.
I mean, I think even both Walton Goggins and Ella Purnell were incredibly nice and generous of their time. And, funny enough, Walton Goggins was like, hey, you should have me on your podcast. So it was,
maybe season 2.
Yeah.
We'll take you up on that, Walton.
Totally.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for this episode of Vault 33.
This season of Fallout.
This season of Fallout as well, yes. I'm going to go around the table, and I'm going to ask, let's start with you, Dwayne. Where can people find your work on the internet when you're not talking about Fallout on Prime?
Check me out on Twitter, twitter.com/Dwayne D. What about you, Tosin?
You can find me on Instagram at BurntToast45. What about yourself, Andy?
My Twitter/X handle is Mr. Babyman, and you can find everything that I'm liking and linking there. As for our show, we are at Fallout Vault 33. We're on all the major podcast distribution networks. Also, you know what? We've come to the end of this episode for this show, but we will occasionally pick up other shows to cover. So, and we appreciate your feedback. If there's something that you'd want us to cover as a show, as a podcast, let us know, and we'll definitely consider it.
Comment on our YouTube or just send us a message on Twitter.
Yes. And of course, outside of that, so coming up will be the second season of The Last of Us, which we will be covering on our podcast, Quarantine Zone. And outside of that, we're toying with ideas about other things to cover. So until then, join us next season when we'll cover Fallout second season. Until then, again, tweet us, leave us a comment on iTunes, and we will see you guys soon.
See you soon. Thanks.
Why don't you call out to the Fallout back to me?